Hello everyone, this is Rona from eMaint Enterprises, and thanks for joining us today for this month's Best Practices webinar. And I'm really pleased to have with me on the line Dan Floen, who is the founder and president of PM2, Professional Materials 2, who's going to be presenting today's topic, how to achieve inventory process reliability. And just for a moment, before I introduce you to Dan, I did want to share, we often have users and listeners getting confused because eMaint does put on a wide variety of webinars, including product training and product demonstrations. But this particular series, Our Best Practices, are not hands-on product training, rather they're focused on strategies and different types of industry best practices, and we invite in guest speakers from related fields. So I just did want to share that if you are looking for the product training, you can ping us after and we can send you the schedule for those. But so for today, as I mentioned, I have with me Dan Floen, and Dan's been in the field of, before he launched Professional Materials Management, I think about 15 years ago. He's been in the field of materials management and operations for nearly 30 years. And Dan, maybe you can start by telling our listeners, you know, you've been in this field for so long, but this is the first time you're presenting this particular topic on processes, and maybe tell us a little bit about what prompted you to put this together and what things are you seeing in the industry that led you to want to share this particular content with our audience today.
Sure thing, Ronan. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. As I travel around the country and talk with businesses and do the kind of inventory services that PM2 delivers to our clients, and by far the most frequent concern I hear is in they're doubting their ability to maintain the inventory after the inventory project is done. So I don't want to invest all this time and effort, and I'm not sure that my people are going to maintain it. So today's session is really all about how to maintain that process consistency and attain inventory reliability through your people.
Excellent. All right, well, I think that's good, and I know, you know, processes can relate to, I'm sure what you're sharing today relates to even other processes outside of inventory, you know. All right, so before I turn things over to Dan for the presentation, just a few quick housekeeping items. I am recording today's session, and we'll share a link to the recording with all the attendees today so that you can share it with your team. Dan has also agreed to make a PDF of the slide available, and if you wish to get a copy, there'll be a brief survey at the end of the session, and just check the box and let Dan know that you'd like to get his slides to maybe share with others. And so your phones are on mute so that we don't get background noise during our recording, but Dan has also agreed to stick around and answer any questions you might have at the end of the session. But please feel free to type them into the questions panel in the GoToWebinar questions area, and we'll go ahead and read them to Dan at the end of the session. All right, so with that, Dan, I'll turn things over to you to get started.
All right, thanks, Rona. Well, you know, at the highest level, as I am out and about talking with customers and things, I think we could probably all agree that most of us, we're all striving for operational excellence, aren't we? We really want to do the best that we can with what we have to get that competitive edge to grow our market share and do it in the most profitable way that we can. So really in a production environment, which probably I'm guessing a lot of you represent, or at the very least a facility maintenance environment, there are really four components of that, of operational excellence. So just want to draw some relevancy through to the inventory side, but it starts really at this level. Number one, inventory, or that is equipment reliability, where we seek to eliminate and reduce deterioration and failure. Now, bottom line here is we're trying to extend our mean time between failure, right? And then there's process reliability, where we're looking to develop optimal processes to control our operating windows and things of that nature. And then there's design reliability, which aims to minimize equipment maintenance and decrease mean time to repair and those kinds of things. And then lastly, human reliability, and this is one where we're constantly trying to reduce the probability of error. And if we do really well in all those 4 areas, odds are very good. We're going to have a great situation with our operational excellence. The thing about it is that they're all interdependent, though, aren't they? They isolated attempts here to improve one area or the other, they're just going to provide limited benefits if we don't really take into consideration they're all interdependent. It's kind of like the house of cards there in the picture. Each area depends on the next area for the whole thing to stand up. And if one area falls, that house of cards comes crashing down, or at least at the very least we have an impact, or we're not going to be as good from a process excellence standpoint. So at this point I wanted to just poll and ask a question. Rowan, I'll ask you to launch the poll question.
Okay, so right now, if you don't mind just kind of sharing where you are, which of the 4 elements of operational excellence fails the most often in your particular situation? And again, is it equipment reliability, process, design, HR, or perhaps you don't know? And these will only be shared in aggregate, so please let us know your thought. It helps kind of identify what Dan should focus on in today's call. And all right, I'm going to leave things open for a few more seconds. Appreciate the votes. The polls will be closing shortly. All right, let me go ahead, Dan, and share this with you. So it looks like 18% of our listeners say it's equipment reliability. 33%, interesting, say process. 7% say design. 35%, the winner, is human reliability. And then 7%, I'm not sure. Back to you, Dan.
Interesting. Thank you for your feedback, and at the same time, not terribly surprising. We know that in many cases, human reliability usually rises to the top on where we could improve most in operational excellence. So I appreciate your feedback. That's consistent with what we see as well. So just bringing it down one more level from kind of overall operational excellence of the enterprise to more specifically focus on total productive maintenance. I imagine many of you here today, you're here because you're directly responsible for plant maintenance, or you have a role in the business that directly impacts it. You may be a plant manager or a planner or a procurement manager or technician, but the key part of your life work day to day is I would think directly impacts productive maintenance. So as a part of your role, you're probably doing something or along these lines. There's many more, but you might be in charge of predictive maintenance events, or you might be monitoring condition of equipment or tracking downtime, or you might be the one that's responsible for managing the parts supply for your repair parts. Certainly there are a lot of elements that go into total productive maintenance. These are just a few, but I wanted to get a little more feedback from the group, and this is the last poll question of the session, but I wanted to get some feedback from you on really what contributes most to your downtime. If you can go ahead and launch that one, Rona.
Sure. Okay, we'll launch poll question number 2, and this time Dan is asking, from a maintenance perspective, which of these contribute most often to extended production downtime at your company? So again, what's the biggest contributor to your downtime? Is it maintenance planning? Was it perhaps a faulty installation? Do you have the wrong parts in inventory or missing parts in inventory? Is it a shortage of labor or technicians? Or again, perhaps you don't know. All right, so looks like about 2/3 of the votes are in. They're moving a little slower this time, Dan, so they might have to think a little more to really evaluate this one. Give it a few more seconds. All right. Well, we're at 90. Oh, a couple more votes still coming in. All right. Intriguing question. Okay, I'll go ahead and share results then. And it looks like of the people who voted here, 42% said it's planning. Only 6% it was faulty installation. 20% say it's missing or wrong parts in inventory. And 23% say it's shortage of maintenance technicians. Percent say I'm not sure. So it looks like 62% it's either missing or wrong parts or poor planning was 2/3 of it. All right, back to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Ronan. Thanks, everyone, for your feedback. And that's interesting and as well consistent with what we hear too. It's you know, without a good maintenance plan, you don't have proper scheduling to get parts in on time, and so therefore, very oftentimes, the result of poor maintenance planning is that you don't have the right part, maybe the right people, the right resources set aside to do that piece of maintenance. So, and the fact that the one thing I wanted to just draw a correlation though is that really, if you answered A through D, really all of those things are impacted directly by human beings. So it's a key part. It takes a human to do planning. It takes a human to install it. It takes a human to manage the inventory. And certainly for the lack of humans, we can't do maintenance. So just an interesting correlation there. Wanted to bring to light. I'm sure most everybody on the phone here knows who William Edwards Deming is. He had a quote in his book, Out of the Crisis: "The greatest waste in America is failure to use the abilities of people," he said. Well, we all know that to be true, don't we? We know this to be true, but for some reason we don't sometimes invest in drawing out the abilities of our people. Instead, a lot of us are looking for ways to just take humans out of the equation altogether. I think the popular opinion might be, you know, you just can't trust humans. Humans make too many mistakes. They certainly can't run 24 hours a day like our machines do. So we reason that the less we trust our people and the more we control them or try to and demand compliance from them, the better our people will perform. And I would submit to you that this could not be further from the truth. I think there's a better way. Let's move down one more level from total productive maintenance, which drives maintenance reliability, to take a look at the components of specifically inventory reliability. And this is really, you know, I think, again, related to not only the planning side, but the management of the inventory itself. So very, very, I think, relevant to that last poll question. We, of course, know that you can't have maintenance reliability without having inventory reliability. Either you didn't plan right for the part or managed the inventory inaccurately, and so the part wasn't there when it came time to do the job. I mean, if you don't have the right parts, you can't perform the work, obviously. So how then do we achieve inventory reliability? And in my experience, there are three elements of inventory reliability. One would be storeroom excellence. That's an example is you've got everything has a place, everything is in its place, and you've got some good housekeeping going on in that area. Things are easy to find for technicians to get in and get out. Secondly is database excellence, where you have a standardized and rich inventory item master, and that data accurately represents what's in stock, so that planning can be done well, so that you can plan for the part, knowing what for the job, knowing what parts are already in stock and which ones you need to order for that planned event. And then process excellence is really, I think, what binds it all together, where we have a well-designed and consistently performed inventory management process, and that team is also looking to always, you know, improve in the way that they do that. Wouldn't you agree that if you had all three of these elements present and they were maintained well, you'd achieve inventory reliability? I think so. There's excellent storeroom, excellent data accuracy, and excellent process. I think you'd have a really, really good shot at having achieving inventory reliability. For the purpose of today's conversation, I really want to focus on and assume that you've already established an excellent physical storeroom, and you already have an excellent inventory database in place, and really hone in on what it takes to maintain that. So maybe you've hired PM2 to come in and do this for you. Maybe you've done it in-house, but now it's the challenge of maintaining it and sustaining that environment that we want to focus on. So let's dig into process excellence a little deeper and how the human influence of that can drive that or detract from it. In the pursuit of inventory process excellence, I see businesses really kind of basically they've got three buttons that they can push to try to achieve inventory process excellence that I see. One is the utilization of automation. You might install a CMMS like eMaint or some other technology, barcode scanning, maybe vending solutions, access control devices, some sort of technology to aid in the process excellence and the deliverance of that. Secondly, a lot of companies are choosing to staff the storeroom, probably more than not, choose not to. But those that do, that have the staffing capability to do that, they're putting staff in place to maintain that process excellence. And then third is probably the path that I see most often traveled is putting the inventory management in the hands of the maintenance teams and the other folks that have a hand in the inventory. It's a path very frequently followed, that gone down, but the one thing that I see is lacking is that these aren't necessarily high performance work teams. These are people that don't see themselves as being in the inventory management business. They're a maintenance technician, and they're used to having inventory managed for them, potentially by a staff in the storeroom. And so what I mean by high performance work team are things like this. The team understands that they're responsible for the total enterprise and certainly the inventory, so they don't necessarily see themselves as just, well, I'm just a technician. I turn wrenches and I don't have any impact or certainly no ownership in the inventory process. A high-performance work team they're committed and they're aligned to the vision of inventory process excellence. They take intelligent risks. They're looking for ways to do things better. They challenge each other. They acknowledge problems. They don't sweep them under the rug. They acknowledge them and resolve the problems. And you see a level of trust in a high-performance work team that you might not otherwise see. So one thing I want to point out here is that these three elements that you see there, automation, staffing, and high-performance work team, in my view, they're not equal in value or mutually exclusive. Some companies may employ one or two, and some even all three, to achieve inventory process excellence. But the distinction here is that you may choose automation or to staff your storeroom, but without a high-performance work team in place, we all know that a human that's not properly motivated can find ways to work around the storeroom and find ways to work around the system, right? I'm sure we all have personal experience with that. For example, you may choose to only rely on automation to maintain your inventory, and if you forget about staffing or the high-performance work team, you are probably going to have challenges achieving process excellence. You may choose to just staff it and forget about automation or high-performance work team, and again, you're probably going to have some challenges there, as many of you can probably attest to. On the other hand, if you had a high-performance work team, as we described, in place, and you were fully committed, that team was committed, and they had inventory process excellence in place, they were committed to that, but you had no automation and you didn't staff the storeroom, would you achieve process excellence? I believe you would. There are a lot of examples really over the centuries before any technology was even around that depended solely on human process excellence and did a very good job of it. So I would just submit to you that given a choice of one of these three, the one I would recommend to focus on would be high performance work team. Certainly having all three is I think the best scenario, but if you only had one, I would focus on high performance work team. Unfortunately, most businesses don't really give this, that I deal with anyway, a very serious look, because they think it's, I guess, to install automation and just staff the storeroom, hoping that that'll, quote, solve the problem. But the problems, I think, very times in my experience, they still exist because there's lacking that one key element. And so, maybe it's a question of training cost. I don't know. Maybe the company doesn't think that the culture is ready or able to make a shift like this to go to a high performance work team. But whatever the reason, for a moment, let's just set aside the reason why we don't or aren't or haven't yet, and take a look at the possibilities. So how do you build a high-performance work team? This is really what I want to get to today, the meat of it. And I'll start with this. It really all starts with our language and our relationships. I put the headline of a Fox Sports news line up there, language barriers eroding with teams teaching English, Spanish. Now, there are probably some companies here represented that have actual language barriers, English and Spanish, but it's amazing. I think a lot of companies may not even have an actual language barrier. We're all speaking English, but there's something missing in our communication, isn't there? It's like we're speaking foreign language to each other. In this example, in Major League Baseball, I think it'd be critical for a pitcher and a catcher to have a good working relationship, don't you? And to be able to communicate clearly and effectively. I mean, if you're the catcher and your pitcher is getting ready to throw you a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, I think it'd be important for you to know which pitch he's planning to throw and where he plans to put it over the plate, or you're going to get hurt, potentially. More importantly, these two guys, they need to trust one another. It's all about trust. So in that same article, they wrote Carol Gabb is the lead English instructor for the Giants minor leaguers. And she regularly fist bumps players throughout a session to celebrate and encourage their progress, it says. During one class this spring, everybody sang happy birthday to work on the simple meanings behind the tune. Players, much like small children, laugh, talk out of turn, stretch, kick off their flip-flops, curl their toes when reading, make faces or even smile sheepishly when they answer correctly and are given praise. Now, these guys are making millions of dollars a year, but here's a English instructor who is she's motivating them and building a team around her, isn't she? She's got some great relationships with her students, and I think the same potential exists in your business when you look to build high performance work teams. I love this quote by Angela Carter. She says, language is power, life, and the instrument of culture, the instrument of domination and liberation. Isn't that true? The power of the spoken word is incredible, isn't it? As we begin down this road of building a high-performance work team, our goal is to unlock the culture of our team. Now, notice I said unlock the culture of our team, not change the culture of our team. I think too often we assume that our team just doesn't care, so we have to change them somehow so they will care. But I would submit that most of our employees don't wake up in the morning trying to figure out how they can sabotage the team. They care, but maybe they haven't been trained how to channel their passions and energy in a way that makes the whole team successful. So if it's our culture we're working on, that is how we relate with and work with each other, we have to start with our language, don't we? Life occurs in a conversation, doesn't it? I mean, relationships are formed and destroyed with words. Nations go to war over words. Spoken words are weighty and binding. When you get married, you speak your wedding vows out loud, don't you? When you're on the witness stand, you put your hand on the Bible and you swear out loud to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. At the end of the day, all we really have to offer one another is our word. And that word can build trust or destroy it. In the book of Proverbs, it says, the tongue has the power of life and death. That's true, isn't it? At PM2, our company, one of our rules of engagement, we call them, is this: control your tongue, refrain from profanity, and use your tongue always to build up, never to tear down. The next time you pray, speak it out loud, and I think you'll notice something different about the one that you're speaking with. Spoken words are powerful, and our team members need to be trained how to use them. I encourage you to really, really hone in on that. The next thing about our language to unwrap for our team as we try to build this high-performance work team is really the notion of where are you speaking from. In our language, there are three domains of conversation: the past, the present, and the future. Now, the distinction here is that actions and possibilities reside in the present and the future, never in the past. I'm going to say that one again. Actions and possibilities reside in the present and the future, never in the past. Now, certainly we can learn from the past, but too often our conversations are speaking from the past. Where do you think the phrase, "this is how we've always done it," is speaking from? Past, present, or future? Or how about this one? "That'll never work because we've tried it before and it was a disaster." Past, present, or future? When we speak from the past, our actions and possibilities are hijacked and new ways of doing things never come into being. I think there's an innate desire within all human beings to be a part of something that's growing and moving forward. We can't change the past, so it has very little value to our present and our future. If you constantly speak from and live in the past, you're just not going to get very far, are you? Coach Lou Holtz said, "You're either growing or you're dying, so get in motion and grow," he said. But how do we do that? Well, for starters, we need to speak from the future, don't we? Not the present, and most definitely not the past. Give your team a vision of what will be based on where you choose to stand right now. Stand in the result. In this case, the result might be inventory excellence, inventory process excellence that drives maintenance reliability. You see, the future lives in what we say, doesn't it? Team effectiveness and power begin with creating a commitment to the future and to its fulfillment. This is done by the speech act called declaration. In the speech act of declaration, a person declares something is possible, stands in, thinks from, looks from the future, and allows the future to guide and shape his or her actions. From there, their actions are shaped by their commitment, not by past successes or failures, behaviors, or reactions to circumstances. I encourage you to stand in the result and work back from there. In his famous speech at Rice University, President John F. Kennedy spoke these words: "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win." When John F. Kennedy said, "We choose to go to the moon," he was standing in the result, wasn't he? He made a declaration, didn't he? Now, I'm pretty sure President Kennedy had no idea how we were going to get to the moon, but he made a declaration. And from that moment, NASA's mission became crystal clear. and all of their efforts would now be aimed at getting to the moon. You know, for you and I as leaders, our responsibility is to define the what and the why, not the how. If we can make believers of our team on the what and the why, they'll figure out the how. President Kennedy defined the what and the why for the nation, didn't he? The what was we're going to the moon. And the why? Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. And so on, he said. President Kennedy was calling upon our innate human desire to be a part of something special, something that's moving forward and growing, wasn't he? Once we define the what and the why, the challenge for us as leaders oftentimes is to stay out of the team's way and not micromanage they get there. Here's an example of what casting a vision might sound like for your inventory management team. Working as a team, we manage a highly effective MRO inventory environment, which makes our maintenance team more efficient and helps to secure our future as a viable company. Notice that this vision statement is spoken in the present tense. Remember, actions live in the present. If our conversation is in the present, our actions will likely be in the present as well. You know, I've heard it said that a good relationship is when someone accepts your past, supports your present, and encourages your future. Well, that's the kind of leader I want to work for. I'm sure you've also heard it said, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. That's absolutely true, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree that that same dynamic is true for your team? If your teammates know, like, and trust you, it's likely that you'll be able to get an effective make an effective request of them, and then you're going to get a committed promise back from them. If they don't know, like, and trust you, it'll be a constant uphill struggle getting the results you want from your team, I believe. Speaking of trust, do you trust your teammates and your team members? You know, we're all very fond of saying that a person has to earn our trust, and I believe that is true, but I would also say that people that have never been trusted are not as likely to be trustworthy. Extend trust to your team members as a part of your relationship building, and they will seldom disappoint you, I believe. Those that can't handle being trusted may just need to be shown a different seat on the bus or invited to get off the bus entirely. It's a matter of integrity. Let me tell you about one of my favorite restaurants. It's called Aw Shucks in Dallas, Texas. Aw Shucks is this little hole-in-the-wall place that specializes in oysters and everything seafood, really. The food is great, but that's not what keeps me coming back there whenever I'm in Dallas. What brings me back there again and again is how they trust their customers. At Aw Shucks, you place your order at the front counter, and then they write your order and your first name on the big black chalkboard behind the counter on the wall. Then when your order is ready, they call out your name, and you go to the counter to pick up your order. And then after you're done eating, you go back up to the counter to pay, and then they ask you, okay, what did you have? Really? I thought. This is a true honor system, and I was amazed when first time being here. Here's a business that has staked their very existence on trusting their customers. Largely, these are strangers coming in the door that they are trusting right out of the box. That's pretty impressive, I thought, when I came in. I'm going to go back there and support Aw Shucks just for that reason, because I like the feeling of being trusted. And so do your team members. Building relationships has to be intentional. Put it on your daily to-do list. Especially for me, I'm an introvert. It doesn't come natural for all of us to build relationships and step out and extend a hand and have a conversation. So for some of us, especially us introverts, we need to put it on our to-do list to be intentional about building a relationship with someone every day. So how do you show up for the people you work with? In other words, who are you being? Are you likable, honorable, and trustworthy? Look at what Warren Buffett says. He's got some pretty candid and unvarnished words for us about the value of who you're being. He says, we only want to link up with people whom we like, admire, and trust. We do not wish to join with managers who lack admirable qualities, no matter how attractive the prospects of their business. We've never succeeded in making a good deal with a bad person. Oh, he doesn't mince words, does he? Would your teammates want to join with you, or do they see you as one of the bad guys? You know, there's this thing that we all know exists in the world called team dynamics, isn't there? Team dynamics are those unconscious psychological forces that influence the direction of a team's behavior and performance. They're like undercurrents in the sea, which carry a boat completely in a different direction that they intend to sail oftentimes. Team dynamics are created by the nature of the team's work, the personalities on the team, the relationships on the team, and the environment they work in. As you know, team dynamics can be good and they can be bad. The foundational factor, though, in getting results is having healthy and productive relationships on the team. Take a look at this pyramid called the foundation of results. Really all starts with relationships, doesn't it? From relationships come possibilities. From possibilities come opportunities. From opportunities come actions, and from actions come results. The key point here is that your results will always be directly proportional to the size of your relationships. The bigger your relationships, the bigger your results. Again, I say, the bigger your relationships, the bigger your results. Work on your relationships with your team, and the team will bring you the results you want. Let me ask you, would you rather have compliance from your team or commitment? Let's look at the difference between compliance and commitment for a minute. Look at the framework illustrated there. It starts with awareness there at the bottom, and then moves to understanding, and then engagement. But then we come to this fork in the road, and how we perceive whatever the change is, the vision that we're communicating, either positively or negatively, that really dictates whether we'll just simply comply or be committed to it. At this fork in the road, how much impact do you think relationship has on whether a person reacts positively or negatively? I would say quite a bit. Wouldn't you? Never underestimate the power of relationships. So what do your team members do when no one is watching? That's really the question here, isn't it? How you answer that question may be an indicator of whether you have a compliance-based team or a team that is committed. So which do you want, compliance or commitment? So how will we be able to tell which turn in that fork in the road your team took on that previous slide? What would this look like in your team dynamics? Well, here are some telltale signs to look for. You know, for example, is your team fully committed in line to the vision, or are they just doing what they're told? Do you as a manager spend more time coaching and supporting your team than you do controlling them and giving out orders? Is the team risk averse, or do they take intelligent risks? Does the team hold back their true beliefs, or do they speak their background conversation? By background conversation, I mean those conversations that go on at a water cooler in the parking lot after the meeting breaks up. That's where the real truth is told, isn't it? Our actions are driven by our background conversation, so it's really important to be able to share it with each other. Otherwise, you may not be getting the results you want from your team, and you'll have no idea as to why not, because you haven't heard their background conversation. What about number 9 there? People are useful to this company versus this company is its people. That's a paradigm shift. Or number 10, are people only accountable for their own role, or are they responsible for the total enterprise? Do they plan from history, or do they stand in the future results and work backward from there? Look at the last one there. Are you a cop making people feel busted, or are you a coach making people feel trusted. If you're not sure where your team stands on these questions, you might consider conducting an anonymous culture survey to get unvarnished feedback from your team as to how they think things are going. Now, this can be scary, asking the team how the culture is, because you may not like the responses you get at first. Your baby may not be as cute and cuddly as you think. But you need to know. So buck up and ask the question, and be willing to accept the feedback at face value and work toward moving the culture further along. Excuse me. You may be thinking, well, that's all nice, Dan, but you know, I have a cross-functional team, and most of the people on my team don't even report to me, so I don't know how much influence I'm going to have on them. Well, I would offer this. There's Tom Kendrick wrote a book entitled Results Without Authority, and is really focusing on how do you get results from someone who doesn't report to you, and really looking at the importance and the way that we can exercise influence and gain influence with the team. And he talks about 5 different kinds of power, and the first 2 there in red, power of position and power to coerce. Well, those first 2, they're kind of owned by the person that you might report directly to. These are the guys that, or ladies, that have the authority to coerce you to do something at threat of losing your job. Well, how motivating is that kind of leadership oftentimes? You know, sometimes not so much, right? You know, somebody pulls rank on you and, well, do this because I'm your boss, kind of thing. So, you know, how committed are you going to be if that's the kind of influence that you're having exerted upon you as a team member? As opposed to the other 3, power to reward, or power of expertise, power of personality. You know, how many of us here on any level of the team possess those things? The ability to reward someone and congratulate someone for a job well done, just like that teacher of the baseball team. The power of your expertise. You're recognized as being really, really good at something and have expertise in an area. You have influence because of your expertise. The power of your personality. How adept are you building solid relationships? So these are 3 things that can really influence a lot and have a lot of positive impact on the team. And you can see the quote there that Tom Kendrick has in his book. While the upper managers in an organization may be able to grant bigger rewards, a project leader who remains alert for opportunities can control through influence. Thank and reward people frequently and thoughtfully, often with rewards that are appreciated more. I mean, how many of us, I'm sure, we've seen the many surveys of companies and employees as to what they value most in their job. And you know, salary is never the #1 thing on the list. It's being appreciated. It's doing meaningful work. So people want to be a part of something special. Certainly they need to be paid fairly, but you know, this is you know, number 3, 4, and 5 on that list are certainly elements that anyone can do, whether they report directly to you or not. So on the spectrum of commitment versus compliance, what is it that we want to reward? I would say we want to reward commitment over compliance. That's not to say you know, we don't also want compliance, but commitment, I think, wins out every day of the week. And you might also consider just, you know, bringing your process to life by naming it. At PM2, we simply call our process of doing things the PM2 way. The PM2 way defines who we want to be as a company and how we do things from a people and process perspective. So you might come up with a catchy name for the way that you manage the inventory process or your reliability program. You know, for example, here at PM2, we've defined some rules of engagement. I mentioned the one, control your tongue. So these are the rules that we want to live by, and I think every team needs to have some rules of engagement that they live by, as well as some measurable key performance indicators. They might include things like 100% process performance, that 100% of the team members on the team, they perform the process 100% of the time. 99% inventory accuracy, 99% uptime, things that are measurable. And then obviously, many of you, most of you, I would guess, you've got key measures, dashboards that you post publicly. I'd encourage you to put inventory management on the dashboard, post it publicly, and really get that sense of ownership of the enterprise as it relates to inventory. At PM2, we have a Team Member of the Year award, and I'd encourage you to consider doing that as well. Here at PM2, we call it a PEMI, and PEMI is an acronym. It's PMMMY, which stands for our company name, Professional Materials Management Member of the Year. And at our company, we recognize the honoree once a quarter. And this is the person that's demonstrated the PM2 way and modeled it for the rest of our team. So we have 4 quarterly honorees, and then we have an annual honoree, and you might consider doing something similar, and they actually get presented this trophy that you see there, along with a $500 gift card. So I just encourage you to look for ways to recognize the team and its individual contributors, and I think it'll the investment you make here will just come back to you tenfold. You remember Otto, the autopilot from the movie Airplane? They just don't make movies like that anymore, do they? But it seems a lot of businesses today have kind of gone the way of kind of installing an autopilot system. Plug in the system, set it up, and build it in it, and then they will come, kind of thing. And the hope is that the inventory processes will just kind of glide along, give them the right tools and the environment, and it'll just kind of happen. And they may not necessarily see the need to train their people thoroughly and build a high-performance work team to be successful in inventory management. But the thing that I want to relay here is that these systems, whether they be an actual software system or a process of the physical storeroom, they're designed based upon certain business rules. The system itself does not exercise good judgment. It does not analyze things very well, based anything outside of the box of maybe a min and a max. They don't do decision making very well, and they really have no personal professional experience. So these are all things that humans bring to bear in the process, and I just encourage you not to forget that there's a huge amount of value that humans bring. Not to make light of the importance of automation and things like that, but without human process reliability, it's going to be hard to accomplish inventory reliability. I don't know if you all remember Sully Sullenberger. He's the captain that ditched that U.S. Airways flight in the Hudson River. He said that flight control computers actually hindered the landing. He said that flight software prevented him from keeping the plane's nose just a little bit higher during the last few seconds before he ditched in the river. So he said we hit harder than we would have otherwise had we been able to keep the nose up. So the flight software actually prevented him from doing what he knew to be the wisest thing to do. So just encourage you, to say that for those of you that have an unmanned storeroom environment, that doesn't necessarily mean, it should not mean that it is unmanaged. So that should be an environment where we have a well-trained high-performance work team training that or delivering on those processes. So your team, they need to be watching and knowing and understanding what's happening with the inventory. You can't just put it on autopilot. And taking actions accordingly. They need to have the wisdom and experience to react accordingly. So I just encourage you to put your inventory in the hands of a high-performance work team, and I think you'll be glad you did. So it was just a quick look at some of the companies we worked with before. If anybody has any questions at this point, I'd be happy to open it up and answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Dan, and thanks to our listeners. Again, Dan will stick around if you have some questions to ask, and so just type them into the GoToMeeting question feature. And Dan, I know that this one is a little bit of a departure because we didn't focus on a technical, but really more on the human side. But one of the listeners is asking on some of the other topics related to inventory management. Do you have some training on them, and we can consider some future webinars on them? What are some of the topics, Dan, that you and PM2 also deliver as far as training in these areas?
You mean outside of the human aspect?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've done a few in the past, and I'd be happy to present them as well. Things like, how to build a rich, standardized inventory item master. Things like how to install and implement an effective physical storeroom environment. So certainly there's those two other circles, and all three work together. It's storeroom excellence, database excellence, and process excellence. Today we really just focused on the process side as it relates to human process, but there's, of course, as you know, a lot more to it. So there's more that we can present around that.
Great. And I'll ask our listeners, the survey at the end, we do ask a question, indicate some additional topics, because as Dan mentioned, his company, has really helped people in so many different aspects of inventory. One of the things I wondered about is with automation, I remember hearing an expression, Dan, that if you just automate a process that's reliable, you just make the same mistake more frequently or faster. And so do you have a certain order of those three pillars that you recommend if people are faced with, I'm now starting to want to get my inventory under control, what specific order do you recommend, Dan?
Well, I would say, just kind of like we said in the presentation, we want to start with the end in sight. So let's, that end in sight, that end being that we have a sustainable process and tools to manage it going forward. So unless and until we've got a clear idea of what how we're going to achieve process excellence, I would not want to spend a lot of time and energy building a storeroom and building that database until we've got a system in place, eMaint's installed and ready to go, and we have a training process ready to go, so that as soon as that physical site, the piece of it and the data is ready to go, we're plugging in just immediately with user training. Even basic user training could happen very early on, but I think you really want to focus on the process side and get that well identified and trained up before you work with the other two.
That's a good point, Dan. And we've noticed that even on the people implementing our software, those that are coming into the project, also reviewing what are the team members, what are the processes, and what do I want the outcomes to be, and have those sort of documented in advance, tend to be able to achieve value back from the implementation more quickly. So I think those are good points. And Dan, in your experience too, you're right that so many of the maintenance managers and supervisors that we deal with, facilities managers, they all have to suffer from when the wrong parts are in stock or there's not a good process, but they may not be the people influencing those, or the ones that, it's in a different department. And can you just share some successes in your travels where that situation has arisen and the company was able to overcome it? What were the steps they took to achieve success? Did it start with executive buy-in? Maybe you could just
Yep.
characterize what you've seen as the path to success in that environment.
Yeah, it sure did. One example I'm thinking of, and I'll not be able to name the company for their privacy, but in this case it was a plant manager. Um, you know, he stated his vision, and certainly the goal had been in place for a long time to drive toward maintenance reliability. But he then, added to that and said, okay, we're going to have inventory reliability. We see this as a key factor, and he established a cross-functional team that had a regular drumbeat, a weekly drumbeat meeting with key players that represented the departments of the areas that impacted inventory, from planning to procurement to storeroom management. Kitting as well was one of them, and but it truly needed to be driven by the project manager or the plant manager. I think if you get that level of support and someone's putting a vision forth, it makes things a lot easier. And we saw team members just really working together very well and making a lot of great headway. So it all starts with, I think, executive sponsorship, though.
Good. And I remember one client also sharing with us, Dan, that until he was able to achieve buy-in, part of the beauty of having a tool, or say having a CMMS, is it does have data. And as the owner of my company always tells me about the systems we have, we're not just here to collect data, but we are here to analyze it, look at it, measure things, and try to improve. And I remember him telling me that he just had a report and just quantified the value of his inventory each week. So when people walked by, they could see it. And he said that did more to raise awareness, just being able to share data like that. So I guess maybe that's another starting point while you're trying to get that buy-in.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for putting this together today. And again, it's a little different perspective on a third pillar that we don't often think about, and that's the people and the process side. So thank you and to PM2 for putting this together, and thanks to our listeners today for taking time out of your day on this Friday to be with us. And again, we'll have a survey at the end, and please let us know, are there other topics, be they technical, be they training, people, process, inventory, anything else, storerooms, anything else you might like to for us to bring to you, and we're happy to get speakers like Dan to come and share their experience. So thanks again, Dan, and thanks to our listeners, and have a great afternoon, and we'll see you all the next time.
Thanks, Rona.
Take care.